Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is a prep coach and NPC bodybuilder. Today's guest is Kyle Wilkes. Kyle, welcome back to the podcast, man.
Thank you for having me a second time.
Yeah, for sure, Kyle. So, like we kind of mentioned before I hit record, you've been on before. It was, I think, about a month out from Nationals in 2021. So we kind of did like you're kind of got your whole story and backstory, kind of the normal podcast episode. What I would like to do today is I'd like to just lightly touch on Nationals in 2021, kind of get some of your thoughts from that competition. And then what was your mindset going into 2022? And if anybody follows you on social media, we know that you went through some different things in 2022. You learned a lot, and I'm really excited to kind of just glean some of that wisdom from you and what you learned last year. So let's start with Nationals 2021. What was your takeaway? What are some of your thoughts from that competition?
Yeah, so going into Nationals, I think I touched on the first podcast, right? I knew what I'd be bringing would be the best I personally brought, but it wouldn't be what I knew I was capable of, right? I think the reason for that, other than having clients competing with me, right, and that being more of my priority, was there were a lot of things that were ongoing in my life that I tried to pretend weren't actually going to impact me, right? But the reality is, as anyone would go through, whether they're competing or even playing a sport or anything in life, even just a regular job, it does affect you, right? A lot more. Usually in hindsight is 2020. So my main takeaway with that is, I should have treated myself as I would a client, and based on the external influences, I would have kind of scratched that,
Okay,
So,
now, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
Okay, so what weight class did you compete in? What place did you get? And then just go a little bit more in depth of like what did you kind of learn, or what was your takeaway overall in terms of kind of building on what you just shared with us?
Yeah, so I competed as a super heavy. Just got right at, I think it was 10th. So the second call out, so once I missed that first call out, that was my goal. And I think I touched on the previous podcast. I knew, you had Nate Spear, Carlos Thomas competing. I knew those guys. Just to be able to stand next to those guys would be a good feat of mine, but in no way, shape, or form, even at my very, very best, did I think I was on their level, just being compared to them in that first call out was like my ultimate goal. So I fell just short of that. And yeah, so.
Okay. Now, once Nationals was done, going into 2022, what was your mindset? Were you going to go into an off season and prepare for another competition? What were you thinking as we went into the 2022 last year?
Yeah. So coming out of that show, you always have some motivation coming out, right? Maybe the fire is lit under you. For me, it was just the realization that, there are other reasons why I didn't do the best I could do. And perhaps that might have also impacted my coaching ability. And at the end of the day, my personal accolades don't really matter. I don't really care how successful of a bodybuilder I am. I rather have people turn pro or at least transform their lives, more so than I rather do well. So going into 2022, I'm not someone who thinks you need to compete every year. I think it's beneficial to kind of cut down a little bit and make sure you stay in a favorable body composition? Yes. But, I didn't have any ambition or desire to compete in 2022. It's more so, hey, the next time I do get on stage, I want to make sure I don't have anything going on so I know I can bring my best. That way the sacrifices I make are warranted, in my opinion. But yeah, so that was pretty much my mindset there. And then while working on that, which takes a great deal of time, and going into an off season to put on real muscle, right, and get healthy, I just wanted to build my coaching resume, right? Continue to have a lot of social media influencers I have under my belt, a lot of younger kids that I know can do real well. And then I also have some seasoned veterans that I have under my belt that I've had for quite some years that are continually getting better. So wherever I can help out and challenge them, I wanted to make sure I did that last year.
Okay. Now, when we last chatted, you were living in Florida. And then from some of the social media stuff I've watched of you, you moved back to New Jersey, I believe. You don't have to get into any specifics of why, but was that transition kind of going down to Florida and then coming back to New Jersey? Was that something too that was maybe a distraction for your competing, or did that kind of take away from some of your coaching and competing as well?
I wouldn't say it was too distracting. Moving across the country is definitely not there's stress that comes with it, right? So I can try to downplay that. But packing, and as my first time really moving out of the state, was a lot. So we just, I went down there with a very good client, one of my better clients, Anthony Mantello, as you're aware. We had some business opportunities down there, and ultimately, things just didn't work out the way we wanted to. We weren't entirely happy. And New Jersey was home, right? So as you touched on before you hit record, going back to Colorado at the end of the year brings you excitement, right? So sometimes we try things, might sound good on paper, but then you're kind of in the middle of it. If you have other things going on, it just doesn't turn out the way we envision sometimes, right? So we kind of packed our bags, kind of went back to reset a little bit. So yeah, I don't think it would have impacted competing really, but moving twice in 5 months across the country definitely wasn't what I had envisioned, to say the least.
Right. Okay, now you before we kind of continue on with your 2022, Kyle, you kind of mentioned, and most people that are going to watch this or listen to this already know this, but you mentioned like you have a lot of like, younger clients and some of the, like some big influencer type people. You brought up Anthony and things like that. I want to ask you, how did you kind of get connected with some of the younger generation and some of these influencer type people? Because I think it's super cool that somebody with your resume and your background is pouring into this next generation and kind of, teaching them the right way in terms of, training, nutrition, bodybuilding, competing, probably helping them on the business side of things a little bit. How did you start working with so many young people?
Yeah, so I'd say, being from Ocean County, New Jersey, right? The first, I guess, influencer I had, or the person that was up and coming, was Anthony. At the time, I was always training with Nick Walker, as I also touched on, I think, in the previous podcast. So I think that'd be beneficial for some people to probably go back and check out. But being around that, Nick was really growing, so that gave me some exposure. And then Anthony really took off. He had done a show at 17. He won the overall, so he was a little teenager beating grown men. And then from there, it's really cliche, but I think word of mouth really does a lot when it comes to marketing, right? I'm not one that is very savvy with using social media, whether that's just personal insecurities or not being confident what I can kind of put out. The word of mouth is what really does it. So it's kind of like, hey, you did a good job, or I've seen you do this. What can you, like, put some time into me? Let's have a conversation. And pretty much I look at those opportunities as, I don't care if someone has 1 million followers or 100 followers. If I have a good conversation with someone, and if I genuinely think I can assist someone, then I'll give them the time of day, and the effort they put in is the effort that I'll kind of put back. And in doing that, I've gravitated toward the younger generation because I see I guess one of the things that really stick out that sometimes used to bother me a lot is with even my generation, which I'll consider an older generation to a degree, being over 30 now. There's a lot of like discrepancies. So when I go to these gyms, there's a gym in New Jersey, Iron Revolution, great gym. It's definitely more based on our contemporary era, getting content, younger generation. And sometimes we'll get older veteran bodybuilders, and they, don't like the kids with tripods wearing tank tops or stringers, don't think they warrant because they're not a certain weight. So that discrepancy, to me, I looked at it like, hey, as I get older, this generation is the one that are going to run everything. That's the reality, right? So it's not that my generation's time is up. It's that, hey, if we don't figure out a segue to how to communicate with these younger fellows, we're going to have a problem, right? And one thing I noticed, just coming from an educational side of things, I always think back to how school must be different now, because when I was going through school, cell phones were just like getting popular. There were no like internet, but I can only imagine how easy it is to cheat and stuff like that. And the one thing with communication, from working with Anthony and younger kids, is because there's no face-to-face interaction, right? Sometimes when you meet someone, there's like a little bit of a barrier because kids are used to just typing away their feelings, whether those are positive or negative feelings. They don't express themselves as the same way that I had to express myself, and that people older than me had to express themselves back in the day. So I've taken a very sound approach when it comes to working with these younger guys, just because I really feel like they're misunderstood, to be completely honest, right? I think that whole, as I mentioned, I try to find that segue between the older generation and the younger one, because some of the older guys have great experience and knowledge, right? But if they don't know how to relay the information, then they can't teach these younger kids. So a sentence or a quote I always like to use with people is, I'll point out the landmines. If you choose to step on them, you choose to step on them. And sometimes we have to step on them, right? And then you start to say, okay, like I respect that older guy because he told me about this. I remember he told me, I ignored him. So that's the approach I try to take. And again, I think a lot of the world we live in now is there's just poor communication, right? So if I can do my part in just communicating, expressing how I feel, then I think, we can really come full circle with everything.
Okay. Now, something I want to draw out of that, Kyle, is what you just said about communication. How do you, with referring to the younger generation, I don't know what generation is, Z or Y or something, but how do you, so, okay, you communicate through a screen, right? Whether that's Instagram or texting or whatever. I think texting is even kind of archaic nowadays. But however you communicate initially, maybe they reach out to you and want to, whatever, have you coach them or something. Like, how do you communicate after you get them maybe in person or something? Like, what are some of the communication skills that you've developed or you kind of practice to communicate with these youth or these younger people?
Yeah, I think the one thing I try to so the initial like consultation with me, right, is typically if someone's introduced me face to face, just because like I have a website, but I think for a year now it says not taking clients just because I don't really take many people. It's very hands picked at this point, but I feel like I can help somebody. But genuinely, I try to have a conversation like we're having, right? And sometimes I'll spend 10 minutes not even talking about the gym at all because I just want to know, like, hey, are you like interested? Did you go to school? What's your story like? Because if I can relate with something, if I could find something that we relate on that has nothing to do with the gym, then I can get an understanding of how you work and how I can kind of come about something. Because there's some people that I know won't respond well, right? Just like I have clients that as they grow, sometimes I can be really hard on them. And then if they're sharing with me, hey, Kyle, like I'm going through a tough time, I know not to be so hard on them in a certain mannerism because they're not going to ultimately, whatever their goal is my goal. And if I can't accomplish that because I'm not conveying what I need from them, we're going to have a problem, right? So the way I try to go about communicating with them is, again, finding some common ground, making them comfortable with, hey, let me know exactly what it is that's going on outside of school or in this prep that we have 16 weeks from now. Are there any pain points that you already know of? Oh, maybe you're graduating, maybe you have this vacation plan with family. Let's discuss these things beforehand so we can work through them so you don't think you're making sacrifices that are going to deter you, or maybe it be perceived by me that you don't care as much. So again, just finding that common ground to make them understand, like, okay, he's not so old. He genuinely cares. That's what a lot of people will always say, like, you genuinely seem to care versus, I worked with so-and-so, they didn't ask me anything, they didn't care really what I did. Whereas I do, because if it's a bad idea to me, let's just say you have a lot going on in the next 12 weeks, you're not doing a show. At least with me, you're not going to do a show because I know you're going to miss out on a point of your life that I don't agree with. And that's just kind of how I go about it,
Did you have somebody kind of bridge the gap for you then when you were younger? Do you kind of see yourself taking the place of maybe somebody that kind of spoke into your life when you were younger as a teenager or mentored you in terms of kind of like the bodybuilding stuff? Or is this just kind of the role that life has kind of put you in at this point, Kyle?
I think it's a combination of, I always looked up to my brother. He's very good at communicating, very ambitious. Has nothing to do with bodybuilding, right? And then because of the educational route I took of things where I worked in corporate America all the way up until last year, it kept me very grounded with the fact of the matter is the bodybuilding community is extremely small, right? Like 0.5%. Most people, you walk into a supermarket, no one really cares. You look like you care about the gym. That's what they're probably thinking, right? So that realization makes me realize, like, hey, there's a lot more to the world other than the gym. So I think that's really important, and a lot of people kind of forget that because especially with social media, you follow what you like. So if you like cars, you're going to follow everyone that has cars. It doesn't mean everyone has a fancy classic car, right? And that goes with the same thing with fashion or flowers, whatever it may be. We all find what we like and that's what we follow. But at the end of the day, if you for some reason are mistaken to think that everyone does that or respects that, then you're going to be, sadly mistaken at the end of the day.
Okay. So you injured your quad at some point last year. I think it was kind of in the springtime. Would you just kind of Walk us through that. I think it was you just had some athletes turn pro, and it happened pretty quick after that. So how did first of all, I want you to tell us like what you actually did, because on your Instagram it said something about a ruptured quad, and then I didn't see any posts, kind of anything specific for a long time after that. But first of all, what did you did, and then how did that shift your year last year after that injury?
Yeah, so I was just getting settled back in New Jersey. I had a good amount of clients competing at Universe. Some that come to mind for other people are just my higher profile clients, like a Vaughn Walker, James English, Anthony Mantello. Had them all in the same show, right? So coming into that show, there was pressure because I knew there was a spotlight. And if they do bad at the end of the day, oftentimes, as you can imagine, if someone does bad at a show, hey, well, who is your coach, right? Because it becomes my responsibility when you do bad, and then when they do well, oh, it's easy. They're genetically gifted, whatever may have you, right? So going to that show, there was some pressure, but the show came, and 2 of the 3 turned pro. Anthony, arguably, with perhaps an adjustment to his posing, I think he would have got his pro card too, but that's a story for another day. So I pretty much came out as good as I could have, right? I had 2 of the kids turn pro, so that was a huge spotlight. So I started getting a lot of exposure, more so than I already had. And I was really riding a high of life. That was like a peak. I was like, wow, this is it for me. Like now I'm getting all these sponsors reaching out to me. It's like I could do no wrong. Everything was going well, coaching wise. It was the best it's ever been. Like I mentioned, I didn't need any clients, and I had about 500 sitting there in just a day from Universe taking place. Fast forward approximately, I think Universe was like July 2nd or 3rd. On July 16th, I do this obstacle course called a Rugged Maniac. So, Anthony was just trying to get some content for something after this Road to Pro series that's very popular that I recommend people check out. And it was this obstacle course. I didn't know anything about it. It was just the day he asked me to Kyle, don't schedule anything in the morning. I need you for something. Cool. So basically he surprises me, takes me to this obstacle course, right? It'd kind of be funny to see a little big guy try to maneuver his way, and maneuver my way I did to the last obstacle. There was a little half pipe, just like an American Ninja Warrior. And I really wanted to skip it, but it was his girlfriend, Anthony, and she led the way. She went first, got up the wall. He went second, got up the wall. I kind of felt a little peer pressure. I said, I got to try, right? I might not make it up, but I have to try. And as I was running, I remember replaying in my head, I just didn't remember where their last step was before they went up the wall. And I never do parkour or jump off walls, so I'm not familiar with it, So I was just like, okay, I'll pretend it's basketball. I'm just gonna jump, like to try to grab the rim. And that's literally what I tried to do. And I just remember I hit the wall so hard that essentially what happened is, because I was going forward and I had jumped into an immovable object, my body started to go up, but the wall was like a brake pad, and it just held me down. And that I ruptured my quad clean right off the bone, slid down the wall, had no idea what it was at first. I just knew when I hit the wall, I was glad it wasn't my face, because I knew I hit it hard. And I kind of, I guess, blacked out for a second. I remember people kind of saying like oohs and ahs. And I just remember I looked like a weirdo. I need to I need to get up. So I stood up, and I've sprained my ankle a couple of times playing basketball or even baseball if I trip or something. And I just thought I need to get off this runway here. I need to get to the side, because I just need to sit down or something. And as I stood up, I remember looking down. I said, okay, I'm going to put my foot down. And when I looked down, my foot was already down. So I said, this is interesting. So I put just the least amount of weight I could on it, and I fell over like a teapot. Like that was it, right? Fell right over. Now I'm waiting for him to come back down, because I didn't think if he thought I was getting up, he was on another planet. So by the time he comes back down, he came over my opposite shoulder, and the way I had fallen, my leg was like Indian style kind of. So I went to stretch and move, and that was the first time I realized I can't move. There's nothing there. So that was kind of like a shock at first, to where I kind of knew maybe something's a little off. This is a little worse than just a typical, initial response to an injury. And then long story short, I went to the emergency room. then they mentioned, they did a couple tests, and they mentioned, hey, you have a ruptured quad. Like, you can confirm it, but like, it seems like if you look here on your good knee, you can see that the tendon is just not there anymore, right? So fast forward, I had a day later, I was supposed to go to Spain for a bachelor party. I was a best man. They told me not to fly, but as I learned in life, when I make a promise to do something, I do it. And I had one leg, so I said I'm going. Right. So I went to Spain for 2 weeks. Right. Main thing was, don't, in my head, if I fall, I knew the quad would shrivel up probably and then make it the surgery much more invasive. But everything went well. Spain wasn't most friendly for handicaps, so don't recommend people go there if you are injured, because the rules and regulations we have here in the States are much more friendly to those who are having trouble with a disability. And yeah, came back, got surgery right away. And as far as my mindset from there, I had always wondered, like I mentioned, I think when I try to relate to people, I think that's like a very key ingredient to developing good relations, right? And I always wondered what it was like if someone had gotten injured and how to come back from that. Torn ACL, I think of like basketball players, Derrick Rose or something like that. And I always wonder, like, I wonder what it's like to be doing what you love 1 second, and then the next, you have no choice. Like, you can't go back and hit the rewind button on life, right? There's no undo button. And I found myself in that position where, hey, for the last 10 years, I chose to go to the gym. I chose to eat a certain way. I fell in love with it. Things are going really well. I have all these clients and they're doing really well. I feel like my name is just growing by the hour at this point. And then that happened. And that, it set me back a little bit for sure, right? It gave me a different outlook on life to where, I'd wake up day to day. And for the first time in my life, I usually always try to help people. And I needed help. I couldn't even live where I live currently because there's stairs. So I had to stay with a very good friend of mine and his wife. And I just remember the first 2 days after surgery, I had checked. I think I was wearing like an Apple Watch at the time, or at least my phone was in my pocket. But I looked at the step count and I was like 55 steps for the day. Like, I wasn't moving. I would just sit there. It wasn't because I was bummed out. It was just like I was in pain. I was just sleeping a lot. And yeah, so my normal day-to-day process, like most people that are probably into fitness, they revolve a lot around their day, around the gym. So for me, being that I quit the corporate job, my schedule was always more free. So I could train whenever I wanted. But now training whenever I wanted didn't apply because I couldn't train. Right. So it just gave me a vast different outlook on a lot of things, right? So I don't want to ramble too much, right? We can get into specific questions of things, but that's the general gist of it.
Okay. Now, some things I want to pull out of that. Did you struggle with some? Did you go through? And this, some people might think this is a silly question, but I want to ask it because I want to get your thoughts on it. I mean, did you go through some dark days? Did you have some depression? Did you wonder if, like, man, is my leg ever going to be the same? Like, am I done bodybuilding? Like, walk us through maybe some of those thoughts, because I think you probably had some sort of thoughts like that at some point. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, the only thing I could say first and foremost is social media is a giant facade, right? You can put on any mask you want. So rarely do you see a lot of things on social media that are actually going on. People project what they want. No one posts a picture that they don't like, right? And that hit home with me because generally, sorry, many people look to me for motivation and all this kind of stuff, right? And for the first time, I didn't have motivation for myself, right? I had a lot of dark days, and that's the harsh reality where, I'd pretend that things were okay and this happened, but I just started to I was talking to Nick Trigili, actually. He reached out to me a lot, very kind person, contrary to what many might believe. And in having conversations with him, one thing he mentioned that stuck out to me was life gave you a reset, right? A hard reset. You have to try to find out why. And that stuck with me. And I said, you know what? You're right. Because everything for the past 8 months, I tried to pretend didn't affect me. I was very stressed. My sleep was poor. So that's why competing was never even a thought for last year, because I was still recovering from that, but because of everything and my exposure going up after that show and everything, all the good things that were happening, there was still a lot of stress. And perhaps I needed this button to slow down, Kyle. Like, you're doing too much. You're trying to train all your top clients who are in this crazy shape. You just take a second, right? And arguably speaking, maybe that's what I needed. That's what I started to think, because nothing would have kept me out of the gym. I sleep 1 hour. I'm supposed to film tomorrow. I'll be there, no matter what. So that's a big takeaway, and working through those days. It's like anything in life. And I guess a way I try to look at it, someone asked me sometimes, or I had a conversation recently where someone mentioned they look at life like there's a lot of mountains and the peaks of the mountains and then a lot of valleys, right? And they mentioned, I wish I didn't have so many, the highs are too high and the lows are too low. I wish I was somewhere in the middle. And thinking about that, I said, you know what? I look at life almost like a heart monitor, right? There's always highs and lows, and that's how life is still going on. If you want to be in the middle, you flatline, you die, right? So with that mindset and trying to just remind myself of that, I realized that sometimes with every high, there is a low. And you just have to realize, now I'm in this low point, I'll be back, right? I'll be back. I can't stay there forever, because they can't stay on top forever either. So that's the mindset I try to take, and I try to apply today. So do I have as many dark days now, being about 5 months post-surgery? No, but do I think my bodybuilding days are possibly done? Not by choice, perhaps, because of the way my outlook is. I don't want to just get back to what I was, because I wasn't good enough, right? So if I can't get back fully to where I was, then yeah, my days are done. And maybe that's what was supposed to be in the cards.
Okay. So when did you, I want you to just talk a little bit more, Kyle, about, how did you kind of begin to pull yourself, no pun intended, like kind of up, from the couch, and start putting one foot in front of the other, and start kind of getting back to some sort of normalcy like you had pre-injury. Like, just walk us through, like, how soon did you get back in the gym or start physical therapy? And can you just touch on a couple of those things, please?
Yeah. So I started physical therapy within 2 weeks. And I remember the first thing I did with my physical therapist, they put this contraption on me. I don't remember the name of it. I apologize. But basically it measures how hard you're contracting. And I pride myself on good neurological connection and developing that. That is something that can always get better throughout someone's career, right? And I can always contract my quads pretty good. So he puts this contraption on me, and it barely moved. And I was so discouraged. I said, oh my, like in my head, like, oh my God, like this is, I don't even remember how to squeeze the muscle. It's only been 2 weeks. Like, what am I going to do? So that was like first epiphany, like, okay, like this is not exactly what I prefer. But I remember he looked at me, he said, it'll get better. Like, don't worry. Cause I got a little upset, and I said, okay, like I trust you, right? This is not the first time you're working with someone who's torn their quad. So aside from that, what made me pull myself a little bit out of the hole are a few things. One, I always know no one's coming to save me, right? That's the harsh reality. No one is coming to save you. You have to love yourself. You have to respect yourself, because if you don't, then you're not going to get very far in life, right? Thinking of that, meant what I mentioned about the hard reset that life gave me. Is that enough for me to quit and give up, right? No, that's not enough for me to quit. And then I guess lastly is the countless individuals that reach out. Hey, Kyle, how's it going? If anybody could do it, you can do it. So I had to do it, not just for me, but for all those people, because I always project this optimistic, motivational person. I can't stop, because some people look at me for that. They look up to me for that. And to hear them say that, hey, Kyle, you probably will never read this message. As I sometimes I started going through a lot of my requests on Instagram, because I try to from time to time, because you never know who's sitting there. And I remember back in the day when I reach out to somebody, if they ever responded, it makes my day. So I would start doing that, and people would be like, oh my gosh, like you made my day. You responded to me. And to think of people feeling that way made me realize I have to, whether I want to do it or not, I have to do it, and it's not like no one has torn their quad. I think like Evan Santapani, I think Branch Warren, all those guys, they came back, right? So what's so different about them? So that's the mindset I started to have. And I said, hey, don't be selfish. This isn't about you, Kyle. You're being tested. And are you going to endure the test, or are you going to fold and give up? So that's what's helped me kind of continue on this journey here.
Okay, so let's I want to ask you then, Kyle, you mentioned kind of stepping away from your corporate job last year as well, and I'm assuming just kind of going in with the coaching full time and then the sponsorships and stuff like that. Can you walk us through that? Was that a hard decision, a stressful decision, or was it pretty easy because of where your coaching business was at the time, and I'm sure even further past that point now?
Yeah, so it was a challenging decision at the time because I always grew up thinking, that's the ideal American dream, right? You get a really sound option A career for many people, right? And I was in it. I was in investment banking. I was in corporate finance, ranking up the ladders, right? And I got to a point where I realized life is a little different in my contemporary era. It's not how it used to be, right? So I started this, what it was, a true hobby on the side. I didn't try to make any money from it. And I realized more and more, as you probably reminded of, you see these influencers in this movement, right? To where now everyone wants to do it. It's a little different, but it was in that initial phase. And I said, there's a lot of opportunity here. And I see people that, no disrespect, I know just with my intelligence alone, I can blow these people away. Then couple that with the opportunity and the actual people I have on my roster already. This is like, it's almost foul proof. So what am I waiting for? Right. And there's something I think back to like a general motivational speakers I had listened to back in the day, or keynote speakers. And when they're always asked like, oh, what made you quit? What made you try? And they basically said, you can't just wait for the perfect time. Just take the leap of faith. Right. And if it doesn't work out, what are you going to do? Right. And I'm always the type of person where even if it didn't work out, like I said, I already had a backup plan. Some people don't have a backup plan. They quit, they're gone forever. Right. It wasn't like I was going to a new country. I can't go back home. It was, hey, if it just doesn't work out, you go back to what you thought was your option, your default career, what you thought you're supposed to do. So it wasn't too stressful. It was just more, I didn't want to let people down. I went to school, and I just felt like I said that was the safe conservative option. And, I got to a point where I kind of get tired of playing it safe. I want to take a little risk here, Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to grab my phone and I'm going to read something, one of your posts off of Instagram. And I want you just to kind of, expound on it a little bit. Cause I was going through your Instagram earlier today, just in preparation, reading through some of your stuff. And, there's a lot of, life wrapped up in what you write. You're not just putting like a quick little quote or something in a picture. You're putting depth into what you're writing on Instagram. So I'm going to pull this up and I'm going to read probably all of it, because I want the people that are watching or listening to this, I want them to hear it and have some context. And I want you, if you don't mind, Kyle, just to kind of, just expound on it. Is that cool with you?
Absolutely.
All right. Excellent. Okay, so it says, and it is a little bit longer, but I'm gonna read it because I want to, and it's my podcast. So, it says, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we write our own story, we structure our own truth, and we alone create the narrative of our own life. It's like this when you live a story. The first part happens fast. You throw yourself into the narrative, and you're finally out in the water. The shore is pushing off behind you, and the trees are getting smaller. The distant shore doesn't seem so far, and you can feel the resolution coming. The feeling of getting out of your boat and walking the distant beach. You believe the thing is going to happen fast, that you'll paddle for a bit and arrive on the other side by lunch. But the truth is, it isn't going to be over soon. The reward you get from a story is always less than you thought it would be, and the work is much harder than you imagined. The point of the story is never about the ending. Remember, It's about your character getting molded in the hard work of the middle. The thing is, if you find yourself in the middle of a struggle with seemingly no end in sight, you're in a good place. The hard work in the middle of any difficult challenge is more important than the ending. You are growing as a person and learning what you are capable of. You are building your character and the relationships with the people around you. You are also building a story worth remembering. So if you don't mind, just where did that kind of come from? And just if you have any thoughts on that more, I would love to hear it, Kyle.
Yeah, so I take pride in trying to bring about insight that goes beyond just the one-liner, right? And sometimes people poke fun, oh, you write paragraphs, but for the most part, 90% of people are very, very like responsive to it, where they're like, hey, this, like, I read this a few times and I still read it weeks later. So where that comes from is I feel there's been a lot of obstacles and adversity I've overcome recently, especially, right? So sometimes I try to not just write for everyone else, but it's a message to myself, right? To remind me of the ultimate goal, right? And I think as we're younger, we always have these dreams and aspirations to be the lawyer, the astronaut, the doctor, and somewhere along the line, sometimes people, they robbed you of that, right? And it's not necessarily because you didn't believe in yourself. It's more so sometimes the opportunities are just not presenting themselves and no one can help you navigate. So I want to help someone navigate to go after that, right? I always tell people the gym will always be there. So as much as you want to work on your fitness and, you know, getting to stage, take the year off, because ultimately what your goal isn't as close as you think it might be. So where that specific message kind of comes from is I would have never imagined to be where I am today and endure the things that I endure. That I endure things that I would never suggest someone else kind of go through. It's like a no-brainer looking back, and it's just like, damn, I was oblivious, like the people around me warned me about something and I just kind of ignored it. And I think for anyone in their story of where they see themselves going, oh, it's just 4 years of college. But before you know it, everyone I ever talked to about that goes and gets a degree, it happened pretty fast. But when you're in it, it feels like, damn, I have tests next week. Like, this is horrible, right? You talk to Chris, or listen, I think after his previous Olympia, he mentioned that there were moments in which he wanted to quit, right? And the same thing you hear from top athletes, where if you don't have those thoughts in your head, right? I'm not saying sit in those thoughts because then they're going to have some negative output, but those thoughts cross everyone's mind. We're all human beings, right? We're all going to endure those clouds. Our days are going to be a little cloudy, but eventually the sun's there, right? You just have to figure out what you can do. Can you observe that cyclical pattern? Like I mentioned, that high of life and that low, realize it will keep going as long as it can until your day's up, right? So during that whole process and whatever your goal is in life, where you want to be in 5 years, okay, work backwards, take things at 6 months at a time. That whole process takes a long time. And there's going to be a lot of things you didn't consider, right? The path isn't just A to B, it's A to Z, and there's a lot of stuff in the middle. Are you still going to stay in the same path? And I think anything in life that's worth it doesn't come easy, right? It comes with a struggle, but sometimes the struggle is something, hey, you did this for 2 years. Now it seems easy. So when you see these overnight successes, sometimes there might be a lot of stuff. Now, yes, there are anomalies in the life, but perhaps their success might be quick, might be 1 year. Maybe there's something negative going to be coming and they're not going to be able to endure it. But guess what? We don't know what happens tomorrow. We could just make the most of our opportunity today, accept it along that journey, right? You're on the boat, you realize, like, I probably wouldn't have started this if I knew it was this hard, but I'm here. And sometimes people, they feel lost. There are a lot of kids that are in school nowadays. I feel like I'm wasting my time. I don't know if I should do this. You're exactly where you should be. You're not supposed to know what you want to do. It's who you meet along the way. Any person that went and got an education, what they do today or how they apply it sometimes has nothing to do with the class they took. But the professor, they remember a lesson that was applied or the discipline they needed for that class, and then they can apply it moving forward, right? So that's where that kind of comes from. I hope that kind of makes sense. And yeah.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful, man. I read through a couple of your and I guess that's kind of why, you mentioned earlier, Kyle, you said something about, maybe not posting as much on social media. It'll come back. I think I froze up here for a quick minute. Can you
Oh,
still hear
okay.
me?
I can hear you. Yeah, it's just a
Okay,
little.
it'll come back. It does this every once in a while. But so earlier, Kyle, you said that you kind of don't post quite as much on social media because of maybe some insecurities and things like that. So what are those insecurities? Because the stuff that I read through on your Instagram, it has depth, it has meaning, it has experience. It is powerful because it's vulnerability, it's life, it's who you are, right? It's what you're going through. So what are some of those insecurities that maybe hold you back from putting more of that stuff out on social media or on other platforms?
Yeah, I think I'm my own worst skeptic, right? I try to be, I've always like more of a perfectionist, right? And I think sometimes I can get the most of you because anybody I've talked to that's been successful, or that started a podcast and then you see where it is today. In the beginning, things are slow sometimes, right? And then they have that one episode, that one post, that one show where they get notarized, right? They get people now know them and they can think back to that time. So I think me being a skeptic, trying to make things too perfect, or I don't want to come off a certain way. I just have to believe in myself, right? So as much as I always tell people, hey, I hope when you believe in yourself as much as I believe in you, you'll be ready. And sometimes I need that myself. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of things I project are things that, hey, I'm gonna be the person that I know I need. I just haven't found that person yet. But the reality is maybe I just have to look in the mirror a little bit more, right?
Okay. I did not ask you this, I believe, on the last episode. Sir Kyle, what's that all about?
So that came about through vlogs with Anthony Mantello. I think he just started referring to me as Sir Kyle a couple of times, and that really caught traction with a lot of the viewers of his. And then with the age gap, so we're about a decade apart, right? So, I have some of his friends are younger, some of his friends are older, but it just really caught traction, I guess. So now, that's what people refer to me as. So if we Google Sir Kyle, you'll get all these different things. And, whether it's Nick that says it, Chris that says it, any of those guys, it just picked up. And I thought it was I always wonder again, I think back to, oh, what's it like to be injured? I'm like, where do these nicknames come from? Because some people have these nicknames. So I thought it was kind of ironic, right? It wasn't like something I call myself. It was someone gave this to me and it was just very generic.
Okay, cool. Okay, we're gonna start wrapping up. But before we do, talk about what's your training kind of look like right now? Are you trying to just kind of do the comeback thing? Are you just maintaining? Where are you at with your own training right now, Kyle?
Um, I've been recently getting back into the gym, right? Not just because it's been a part of my life, but because I have clients that I know I need to show up for. And I like to lead by example. So it's a little difficult when I can't take pride in training legs like I used to, right? So there has to be a comeback to a degree, to at least set the tone for that next person that perhaps gets hurt, unfortunately. And I'm there to say, hey, you know what? I know exactly what you need to do, right? So I've taken a little different approach with training that I've been applying actually with Anthony, so I can continue to. We built our relationship better than it ever was, right? When we were in Florida, I was going through prep, I was stressed, he was stressed. There's a little rocky point, like anything in life, to where I was just like, darn, maybe I wish I never moved down here because I don't want to jeopardize something with my son, quote unquote. And in training with him, we're doing a little bit more frequency, lower volume. So I'm hitting body parts like 3 times a week as opposed to just a traditional one. But I'm just putting in like 2, 3 exercises maybe, and we're staying fresher. And it seems to really be, so I use myself as a guinea pig, and then indirectly he's a guinea pig for these next, the last 5 or so weeks, the next 4 weeks that we'll probably run that block of training for. But it allows me to kind of give my body a break, because otherwise I can't really be in the gym. And I try to get in the gym right now. So with Christmas and all that, it's always a harder time of year to be training consistently. But more so recently, I'm more confident in the fact that I've been in the gym at least 4 times a week, probably training. But I had to maneuver the split so that I could train with people, because usually, legs took up a day and then you need a day off or something. I don't have that anymore, so that's where I'm at with training.
Okay. Now, specifically legs, what are you doing for that? Are you just kind of focusing on like leg extensions and stuff, or what are the specific movements you've been doing or found that, you are getting a good connection with?
Yeah, so honest, being completely honest, after Christmas, my insurance with my physical therapist had run out right before Christmas, so I had to take a few weeks off. And yeah, never went back, man. Right. So I've been taking it a lot lighter than I should. I haven't been aggressive with it because the main thing for me, I don't want to, I know it takes time to heal. That's the reality. It doesn't matter how bad I want to come back. I need to make sure it's healed, right? So I can look at the incision. I see the redness. I know, hey, if it's red on the outside, I know the inside is not ready yet. So with that said, I'm just doing some body weight things still. I'm not trying to squat. I'm not forcing myself to do things. I try to do the leg extension. There's like a prime piece we have at our gym, but it's real difficult to do it one leg still. Like it doesn't feel great. So I'm just trying to slowly but surely work on the active range of motion, get a better contraction. Like I mentioned, start to work on that neurological connection again. So even if after I stand up, because I've been sitting for a while in this seat, I'll try to flex the quad a little bit, see it come back to life to where I can kind of mentally not think of, I don't want to hurt it. Some people ask, and perhaps you were going to, did you train the other leg at all during that time off? Because scientifically, if you train the one leg, it's proven to hold muscle in the other. And my answer was no, because 250 pounds, I'm already putting more weight on it. I don't need it sore and get that leg hurt. So I just said, hey, I'll let it atrophy a little bit. Once I'm confident, I'll get back into it. My biggest thing, again, not to go on different tangents, but as far as getting back to where I was, there's going to be that level of fear where I'm going to think like, should I do this? Is this too much? So I think just trying to really start at the ground up, get back to my active range of motion where I'm confident and not chase numbers and weight and think, oh, Kyle, you used to do 500 pounds for 10 reps. Like, I don't care. I just want the look. If I get it with 200 pounds, God bless. That's the goal.
Yeah, for sure, man. And that's something I've heard Evan Senapani talk about, Kyle, is just kind of like getting back underneath the weight after he tore his quad, and just just that fear and stuff. And I'm sure it's just probably at some point it's more of a mental breakthrough than a physical breakthrough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, coach, your coaching business. This is who you are. This is what you're doing. You've gone all in, done with the corporate stuff, at least for now. What is your future vision that you have for your coaching business? What do you want it to be? What do you want it to become? 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? What's the vision as of today, Kyle?
Yeah, so for where coaching is at, I recently have brought 2 coaches under me. They'll be kind of coming out toward April. I'll announce that, just because, like I said, I have a heavy influx of candidates and or inquiries, I'll call them. I want to make it seem like a position. And I don't want to take more than I can handle. Right. When I was injured, coming back, having those days that are down, I know I wasn't myself. I couldn't offer what I usually offer because I'm not there, So as that picks back up and I'm comfortable with the load I have, there's people I still want to help, right? My biggest thing is hard for me to say no to someone I feel like I can really help. So if I have people that are equipped under me that I can trust fully, then that's okay. And I think that's the hardest thing. Whereas, again, I never got into this for the financial aspect. I got into this because I thought I could do a good job and connect with people and give them a memorable experience. And in bringing someone under me, there are certain values I have, right? So how I am, if I get a client and they say, Kyle, I want to be an Olympian, I'll kill myself. Cool. I'm good. I will recommend people for you, but I am not interested in playing that I don't play like that. Okay. So that's as simple as it gets to. But those values, there are some people that they just want to see how many clients they can get. I don't particularly care. I have a lot of lifestyle clients, and the good thing about lifestyle clients sometimes is I give them something to do. They check in. Hey, I didn't follow what I was supposed to. So I don't expect you to really change much because I didn't do what you asked. Whereas you get the competitor, I feel like I could be I'm not progressing, or I feel like I'm not lean enough. And it's just like, are you following the plan? And well, and it's just like, okay, so it's like a lot of finger pointing, right? So that's those values and working through that. Like I said, I always want to continue to feed that next generation, because before you know it, they will be the ones that are catering to us for when we need something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Final kind of question here from last year's. I don't know how do you follow kind of the NPC and like the Nationals and the USA's and North Americans pretty closely, or not really?
Yeah, I'd say I follow them pretty well. I would say North Americans this past year, I probably wasn't present for because I just had surgery.
Okay.
But generally speaking, yeah.
Are there any guys that turned pro from kind of last year's major pro qualifiers, Kyle, that kind of caught your eye, or you were really happy to see them finally turn pro? Anybody off the top of your mind?
More just knowing the person. I know Vinny finally turned pro after nationals. He was always a bigger guy. I think he has potential if he can fulfill that, it's to be determined. But I thought it was nice to see someone that's been trying for a good amount of years. I would say going back to my show, seeing Nate Spear, Carlos Thomas, I think he can be a nice force, right? So I think that was kind of cool to see. I think also that shows when Justin Shire, I won't say his name.
Yep.
So that's what rings a bell most prevalent in my head of those guys that stood out, because I remember seeing them in person next to them. And I was just like, okay, you guys are next level. So aside from that, I would say that's the NPC side of things. Pro level, I obviously watched my buddy Nick, seeing what he does. I think that's interesting of the Arnold, and I think 4 weeks, maybe a little less, depending when this podcast comes out. But before you know it, that'll be here. So I'm interested to see, if he can win or if anybody can give him his run for his money. So that's kind of where I've been looking at those guys, as those guys hit home. They're from Jersey, Clarita, and stuff like that,
For sure. Cool. All right, Kyle, I won't take any more of your time. Before I do a quick outro and I do let you go, any final thoughts, any final words from you, anything that you want to shout out, anything you want to share with us? I'm going to turn it over to you, then I'll do a quick outro. So platform's yours.
Yeah. So first and foremost, thank you for having me on a second time. Much appreciated. It's been cool to look back to see how many episodes you've been able to complete since we last spoke. I think you had reached out a little earlier. You were patient with me and flexible. And I think what I would encourage for people is to be vulnerable, right? I think a lot of times people try to project that they are stronger than they are, right? So sometimes it's okay to take that cape off. You don't got to be a superhero, pretend you're someone you're not, because we are all human, right? And I think when we express ourselves and show that emotional side of us a little bit more, you never know who can actually help and what you can actually do for someone else, right? So that would be my takeaway there.
Excellent. All right, Kyle, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you coming back on. I'll do a quick outro and I'll let you go, okay?
Sure.
All right. All of you who are tuning in to another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you so very much. If you guys have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button in regards to Behind the Muscle podcast on YouTube. And then also please take this episode with Kyle, share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Kyle, tag Behind the Muscle podcast, so that we know that you listened specifically to this episode and found great value in it, in which I know you did. And if you guys would like to catch the first episode with Kyle, where we kind of get into his upbringing and his backstory, the normal, typical Behind the Muscle podcast episode, that is episode number 61. So you guys will have to scroll back probably quite a ways, because this will be number 289. But you can find that on YouTube, and you can kind of get Kyle's full story. So, and then per the usual, I will leave you guys all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.